It was an abandoned church building from another century that reopened its doors in February of 1954 in Ogden Center. It was a group of 20 people under the leadership of Pastor Fred Frinkle.
We never saw it inside. We would see the outside and what disrepair it was in, and we would drive by there sometimes and we'd think, why don't they tear that old building down? Raccoons and wild animals lived in the building.
I thought they were bats.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. And they chased the raccoons out to get in there and do the work. Yes.
So the raccoons and the bats were kicked out, and the church began to call people to worship again with the sound of the bell ringing before the morning services of the newly established Ogden Community Bible Church.
It was time for the worship service, not for Sunday school, because we had Sunday school first. But they would ring it for the worship service, and I'm sure it woke up all of Ogden Station.
All 5 houses.
Yeah.
All 14 people.
Because you could hear it for quite a distance. If the wind was in the right direction, you could hear it for a long distance. But every Sunday, we heard that bell.
Yeah.
God bless those pioneers, and the church grew to be an important ministry of the Ogden Station area. And in 1964, one of the greatest additions ever added to the Ogden Community Bible Church building was indoor bathrooms.
There were not inside restrooms when we first went there.
Not until
it was later toward that. I'd say probably 66,
67, somewhere around
somewhere
there.
around there.
We burned them.
Yes. Yes.
That was a ceremony.
And I remember they were going to work on building these restrooms, putting these restrooms inside, and so they had a work day, and of course all of us went to work on this building.
It was under the leadership of Pastor Dick Smith that God caused the church family experience that we continue to recognize as the roots of Ogden. A place where people could be themselves and be cared for together as they grew together and reached out. A significant growth came during his leadership, and with growth came the need to build. In 1969, the country church added a large sanctuary that seated 300 people.
They didn't know if they were gonna get the building done, this new sanctuary done in time for our wedding. We were getting married in August of 1970, and they got it done. We were the first wedding in it, so that was fun.
Pastor Smith served until 1971 after 8 years of service. In 1972, Pastor Larry Bush, a program-driven pastor, arrived and led the church. Continued growth occurred. A parsonage was built in 1974, and a gymnasium in 1978. The church ministered regularly until Pastor Bush's departure in 1983. In 1984, God brought a pastor with a strong personal discipleship emphasis. Those who began to attend identified Pastor Gary Abney as a significant influence in their faith. Gary served for 10 years, even while his young daughter struggled and died from leukemia. It was under his leadership that a focusing of Ogden's mission was solidified. The church was primed for change and growth.
Yeah, but the real concept of us being more than a church in and of itself, but reaching out into the community started with Gary Abney.
It did.
His discipleship efforts just kind of spread us out from being ourselves as a church to wanting to impact the community, and that's where we kind of started thinking about, could we actually have somebody from Adrian in our church or whatever, that kind of thing. So,
in 1995, God brought Kurt Bjorklund, a young Trinity Evangelical Divinity Seminary graduate, to Ogden Church to fulfill the dreams of reaching Lenawee County's unchurched people. Pastor Kurt was a dynamic visionary who inspired the church to reach out while reaching in. The church made a dramatic decision in 1998 to move its services to the Croswell Opera House, where it had significant growth.
And as I recall, the Saturday night before the first service, we got a call and said, come on in at about 7 o'clock. We're going to set up all the equipment, and we shouldn't be there till 9:30. We left the Croswell at 2:30 a.m. and it still wasn't working. So we had service basically just on a leap of faith, and it worked. It worked, and we had no clue whether it was going to. And I happened to be in charge of the sound system at the old church, so of course I had to be there. And there were a lot of dials and a lot of plugs and a lot of lights that we didn't know what they were for, but Sunday morning it worked.
It became obvious that the church needed a new home to do weekly ministry as well as Sunday ministry. A search began for land along US 223, the most heavily traveled road in Lenawee County.
Bill and I were going by down 223 one day and saw this property here, and the daughter of the man that owned this property had gone to Bible school and was in our youth group out at Ogden, and so I said, well, maybe this is a possibility. And so we stopped in, and he said, well, bring your pastor and come back. I think he said on Friday, and we'll talk about it. I'll think about it. And we went in there, and he said, I really don't want a factory or something else in my property right next to my house. And I said, we've decided that maybe we'd like a church there. And so I think if you guys would be able to come up with, said, I know it's on 223, it has more value than farm ground, but I understand you're not going to want to pay that much, and so I think we'll just give it to you for $100,000. And we all just about turned white and passed out and started, like this, and didn't quite know what to say, and we just said, well, that sounds pretty good to us. Let us get a plan together. And I guess God got the plan together, because that was on Friday, and on Monday when Connie went out to get the mail, there was a check in the mail.
Well, you promised not to tell anybody, though.
Oh yeah, we didn't. Yeah, we didn't tell anybody that this was even in the works, and so nobody but us, Bill and me and Kurt, knew that this was going on. And Monday, Connie went out to get the mail, and there was a check in the mail for exactly $100,000. Exactly.
Property was located in 2001, ground was broken in 2002, and construction began in 2003 for a new building that would contain the ministry. On February 15, 2004, the first service was held and strong growth continued. In late 2005, God led Pastor Kurt to his present church in the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania area. God has dramatically used the new building on US 223 to continue ministry for the past 10 years. The church went without a pastor for 2 years after Pastor Kurt left, but the staff and elders continued to serve, and God caused its largest attendance at Ogden Church during that period, as a variety of associate pastors, interim pastors, and guest speakers carried on the teaching load. When God brought Jeff Barbieri to be the teaching pastor at Ogden in 2009, Pastor John Maguire was the lead pastor. Pastor John left to take a position in Nashville in 2010, and Pastor Jeff took on the lead role. Pastor Jeff served the church for 3 years, leading again strongly in church discipleship. Pastor John Maguire, who had returned as a support pastor, stepped up and is currently serving as the lead pastor. Under his leadership, the church has refined its ministry to the 3 steps and has renewed its passion to build God's church and redeem the world. While God has led the church using 7 pastors over 60 years, He has also used assistant pastors, youth pastors and directors, worship pastors and worship leaders, children's directors, administrative assistants and support staff, and hundreds of volunteers. God has used His people to serve His people. It is estimated that the personal impact of Ogden Church has numbered in the thousands over its brief 60-year history. Dr. Kurt Bjorklund often stated, "The story will be told in the changed lives of people." We, together, celebrate 60 years of changed lives at Ogden Church, and we proclaim as the angels, "Great is the Lord, and greatly to be praised."